Colin Powell once said, "There are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." And we couldn't agree more. This is Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. We'll talk to people from all walks of life and pick their brains about their journey, the process, and the ups and downs to becoming successful. You want inspiration and motivation? It all starts here. This is the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Kyle Sullivan.
What's going on, champions? Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Today, we have Randy Lanning. He's a seasoned public speaker, leadership coach with an impressive 20-year career dedicated to transforming lives and empowering individuals to achieve their fullest potential. Having worked with a diverse range of clientele from Fortune 500 companies to ambitious entrepreneurs and thriving small businesses, Randy has built a reputation for delivering impactful, motivational messages and practical advice in the world of leadership development. And in 2022, he was ranked the top 30 speaker in the nation at the Great American Speak Off, which is where we met. Randy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. And man, I wanted to tell you what's missing in your bio in what I rose in respect for you, not only what you do, who you are, but who you are as a husband and a father, man. Y'all follow this guy, as y'all know you will after this interview. But man, how you love your family, well, love your wife and your kids is super, super impressive. And so, and talk to us about that. Who are you behind the bio?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. You know, people often joke that like, that's the, their half and all this and that. And I actually believe that. I think when you meet somebody's spouse, significant other, and you meet their family and their children, you definitely get a much more holistic picture of the people. I found that I might respect an individual to a degree. They have a certain pedigree. They're an awesome person. They're a communicator, good speaker, all of those things. But you can learn so much more when you see that significant other, because I don't know if you're anything like me, brother. It's like sometimes somebody's a really good communicator and then you see how they speak to their children or spouse. And it tells you a lot. And I'm not going to say that I'm perfect at that, but what I do try to be is authentic. Is it back now?
Yep, it's back now. It cut out for just 2 or 3 seconds. It's weird.
So weird. All right. I'll just pick right back up.
Yep.
I do try to focus on is being authentic to who I am, whether it's in the workspace or at home. I want to be the same person. So we've had people from work that have seen me at, corporate events and speaking, and then they come get around our family and they're like, you're the same person. And to me, that's the very important thing, because I want my kids to be able to see that, recognize that, and know, not which dad are we getting today? Which husband am I getting? My wife, which husband am I getting today? But know that he can be authentically true person, and you don't change those hats for environment you're in. And that's a big factor. But truthfully, those who get to meet my wife, meet my kids, they really are the better half, and they're why I do what I do.
Yeah, man. And when we started following each other, I was like, man, this dude is one like me, where man, you just want to dote over your family and your wife. And so I love that. But man, let's talk about what you've been doing. I mean, 20 years you've worked with, the individual entrepreneur, you work with small businesses, multiple Fortune 500 companies. Man, talk about that journey, because that's a wide spectrum. And so just tell us kind of how it got started, how it's moving. Yeah.
I think, a lot of times we start these side hustles, right? And for me, I shortly after college got into sales because I needed to make money, and I wanted to provide for my family and provide a life for my family. I knew I needed to hit the pavement. I needed to start selling. While simultaneously, I was building a reputation as a communicator and a speaker through small businesses, through smaller, some community groups, helping some organizations with their training. I was speaking in some churches, doing some stuff like that, and all of that realm and world of speaking. both of those lanes were running simultaneously. And then there was a period of time where they intersected, where people saw the development I was doing outside of a corporation's walls and said, we also need that inside this. And that's where kind of learning and development intersect what I was doing privately in my work hustle, my side hustles, and then the actual corporations where they intersected. So truthfully, I've been doing public speaking now close to 20 years and been in the development lane aspect, whether that's with adults or teenagers or young married people or leaders all across the board. Probably about the same, close to 20 years now, which it doesn't feel like I've been doing it that long. But when I look back and reflect, you can absolutely see that it's been that's been the journey.
Yeah, man. And so if you're watching this, he started when he was 2.
Right.
Doing this because my man got some good genes. And you said that when we met, I'm like, 20 years? What? Mm. But man, leadership and development has changed so much over that time. I think back maybe 10 years ago, it was a lot of, it's a lot different than it is now. Generations coming into the workforce are different now. How have you seen it shift over the 20 years that you've been doing it? And what's some of the biggest advantages to how it's done now? And maybe even some disadvantages to how kind of the personal growth, leadership development space is?
I think 10 years or so beyond that, I remember when some organizations with their sales teams, like it was a big deal for them to actually go and use for point of sale or to try to write a contract or close a deal or sell product, anything like that. I look at that lane and that aspect. Technology has absolutely shifted and changed. We could look back at the last couple of years and recognize that it's taken another huge leap. And here we are on Zoom, right? I think we've seen it shift from on-demand learning is definitely still something that's vital. People still need podcasts. People still need on-the-spot relevant learning and training. I don't think that's going away or shifting at all. But what's often been cited over the past maybe decade is that we are in this thing called the age of information, right? And I'm sure listeners, people have heard that. We're in this age of information. You can, with Google, you can get any information you want. Now with AI, you can get whatever information you want. In an organization, the ability for an associate to quickly resource themselves and get information they want is absolutely there. I think the biggest transformation I've noticed over the past couple years, though, is this concept of, yes, I believe we're still in the age of information, but I think we're in the stage where we are blending out of the age of information and moving into what I'm calling the age of action. And that's what I think we're seeing is people may not necessarily need the information because they can get the information from anywhere. What they need help with is how do they implement it? How do they actually go about implementing information? So I find that most people, most associates, they're not starved for information. They're starved for implementation. And we can live in both of, I think, these dimensions here at the same time. So I've trained people across numerous industries, government agencies, leadership on the highest levels in the nation in some cases. And people need, yes, the right information, but they also need the leadership, the guidance, the coaching, and how to apply the correct information. Great training, whether it's a church's discipleship program or it's an L&D or an HR department onboarding or working with new associates, or you're trying to upskill your associates. Information is very important, but it's the application of that truth that really begins the transformation, taking a bad associate, making them good, a good associate, better and great, and taking the development person, same thing, how you apply the information. So a lot of times we get focused in on making sure the information's correct and right, which is important, but there's a missing component. How do we help people actually apply it? And how do we help them take that next step, whatever it is for them?
Yeah. Randy, do you think that learning styles come into play here? Like I think maybe it was more cookie cutter. A few years back to now, there's more openness to different learning styles. How have you seen that kind of shift your industry and whether you're working with individuals, small business, or, larger corporations?
So that's a good question. So when I was in probably about second grade, I developed a reputation for being really bad at math. And I embraced it. I adopted it. But there's a very pivotal point in something that happened. I was sitting towards the back of my class, and my teacher at the time was asking around, what's on the board, solve the problem, solve the question, whatever. And then it came to me, and I told her in my own, youthful way, I said, I can't see the board. And, look, I won't shy away from it. Maybe I was mischievous as a child. I'm sure, foolishness is found in the heart of the child, right? I'm sure there's an element of playfulness that maybe she heard that and said, what do you mean you can't see that? Are you blind? And it became a big issue because I told her I couldn't see what was on the board. So later on that day, my parents were meeting with the principal after this big whole ordeal, and they take me to get my eyes checked. And as it would have it, I had very poor vision. Some would say borderline legally blind. And I had to start getting glasses. I pair those two events together because I think it reflects what's happened in learning and where learning has gone. Number one, I said I was really bad at math, and I adopted that persona. I believed in it all the way through elementary school, junior high, into high school. And it wasn't until I was in a real life application scenario with a previous employer where I started to get the reputation of people saying, oh, you were probably a whiz with me. You were probably so good with me. Oh, look how you worked through these scenarios and you quickly made sense of this and you applied it. The problem is, in one scenario, the application of the information that I was getting, I said I couldn't see it. I didn't have a leader or a teacher at the time who would help me be able to see it, but I also didn't have a scenario to apply the information towards. So I took on a persona that I wasn't good at. I think a lot of people operate in the same way. They adopt a mindset based on the environment or conditioning that they've experienced and seen, when what they really need is a leader or a mentor or a person or a podcast to be able to say, no, you might just need to change your scenario. And that's what I think is happening now, especially you look at the school systems, colleges, you look at how many examples do we need where, the old quote is, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll forever think itself inept or unable to do what it's taught to. I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of being produced. And by the time people get into corporate America, their learning style, I'm not a good student. I'm not this. I'm not that. So there is a lot of deconstructing in those spaces and then trying to help people reconstruct it to a more healthy growth level type mindset.
And how does that balance or create alignment between, okay, we got to deconstruct this to, okay, I need you to start doing your job. Like, how do you weave that in? Because I love that. And I love that you as a leader in what you lead and how you mentor goes, okay, hey, let's do this. But then working with teams, it's like, we need to, like, we're paying you for a job. You need to do that while doing this deconstruction work. How does that align?
I think the first layer, I want to quote the famous poet, Michael Jackson, when he said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror, right? I think every leader, the very first thing you got to look at as a leader is yourself. Do I have the information correct? Am I positioning myself? Have we positioned the information to be received well? Like, there's a lot of mirrors we've got to look in first and foremost to make sure we have done everything we can to ensure that our processes are right, that our information is correct, that we've done that reflective work, because then the next layer is we can actually hold somebody accountable. If we have the information, we've delivered it properly, well, now we can begin to give the person the information, make sure they know where to get it, how to adopt it, how to embrace it. They go through whatever programs they need to go through to embrace it and adopt it, implement it. But then secondly, we can now reinforce and have expectations around what that is and what it looks like. And that's easier said than done. But let me give an example, and I think this will resonate. When my middle son, Brogan, who was maybe 3 or so at the time, was notorious. And if Brogan, if he's listening to this one day, at one point, I love you so much, buddy, but he was notorious for being very delayed in putting on his shoes for us to be able to. Okay. So we would tell our boys, certainly not my youngest at the time, Callan, he would have been too young. We still got to put the shoes on for him. But Brogan was at that age where he was capable and competent enough to do it. But then the distractions and then the show and then the snack and then it gets with kids, right? You have little kids. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'll say 3.5, 1.5. I'm in it. I am right here with the story.
You're going to love this. So we would tell Brogan, hey, here's your socks. In some cases, we would set them out. right? Here are your socks. Here are your shoes. We've got other kids to take care of. We got to put kids away. We got, or put the dog away, or we got to make snacks. We're packing a bag because we're trying to go somewhere. Put your socks on, put your shoes on. We know he's capable of doing it. We also know that he's able, right? He has everything that he needs to do. So you leave. What happens when you come back in the next 5 minutes, right? One of two things happen. He's done it effectively, or he's not done it. And at that moment, as a parent, I have a choice. We have a choice. Do I sit him down, quickly put the sock on one foot, the sock on the next foot, put the shoe on the next foot, put the shoe on the other foot? Or do I stand there and do I take the second to say, put your socks on and watch him do it? Put your shoes on, watch him do it to ensure it. A lot of times leadership is very similar to that. Parenting is very similar to that. You know the verse, train up a child in the way they should go, right? A lot of times we're training, yes, for change or improved behavior, but what we're also trying to train up is their mindsets just as much as we're training up their behavior. So as associates and as a leader, I need to make sure they have their socks and their shoes, but I need to, with adults and adult learners, I need to fight the tendency to constantly rush and put their socks and shoes on for them. I need to make sure they have what they need. They know where their socks are. They know where their shoes are. Everything they need. I've done my part to them. I've also given them expectations on within the next 5 minutes, I need your socks and shoes to be on so that we can move to the next phase. If an associate's not doing that, do you have what you need? Do you know where it's at? What's going to happen next time if this continues? Well, you're going to let your customers down. It's deadlines and targets, right? Connecting it to purpose. But I see more often than not leaders rushing to try and put socks and shoes on for their people rather than trying to adjust the mindset of, we need you to do this. If you're capable, confident, you should be.
Randy, this story, one, I love that you used the story of your kiddos because I think I experienced that this morning. And yesterday morning and probably tomorrow morning.
100%.
But
I want to say it's going to get better, but man, before basketball practice, we're constantly like, kids, put on your shoes.
Right.
Yeah. So
right. It'll calm down when they move out. Mm-hmm. But when I would have new team members, I would say very first conversation with them. They get through the hiring process, they're onboarded, they've gone to the orientation, and they'd get to me. And I would say, I need you to recognize, understand, and embrace 7 words. Mm. If you don't listen to another thing that I say for the duration of their time that you're on my team, listen to 7 words. And they got their notebook. They're real eager, right? They're like, what are the 7 words? And I would say, I trust you. I believe in you. Mm-hmm. I trust you. I believe in you. And you would just see their shoulders sink. You'd see their face light up. And then I would follow it by okay. And my response to your questions 99.9% of the time is 2 words. You decide. The most infuriating thing to people who have been led by a leader that said, I'm going to put your socks on. I'm going to put your shoes on. And it would be a point of tension. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because we train children, grade school kids, high schoolers, college to go, I'm going to tell you what to do. You do it. You come back. You get a satisfactory grade, and then we'll give you the next thing. Mm-hmm. But dude, it was the thing for people. I think I probably, man, I had so much camaraderie on the teams that I led because if they'd come up, hey, what do you think about this? Nah, you decide. Well, what should we do about this project? You decide.
Yeah.
And when I go in and work with teams now, and boy, it is a point of contention when I tell the leader, just implement those 2 words. You decide. They're like, well, what if they do it wrong? I'm like, if they do it wrong, will it sink your business? If the answer is yes, step in, fix it immediately. Yeah. If the answer is no, see how it plays out. Let it roll.
I love that. You know, one thing I teach often, is empowering and definitely trusting your people, right? You've hired them for a reason. Trust them for a reason, because a couple things will happen. Number one, if you put your confidence and you empower them to make a decision and you trust them, what happens if they fail is the most often like that first kind of thought. Well, if they fail, I now can better understand where they need support. Okay. And I'm not talking about like crash and burning and losing your business and like, right. Let's be wise and good stewards. But if they fail in something small, I now know where I need to coach and support them better. But I also now have the ability, or I have a space to coach them better.
Right.
Okay. Because I understand it. So I can coach them in a more meaningful and impactful way. But what happens, the other side of this, what happens if you empower them and they succeed? Well, now you know something about them. You've leveled up their capability and their confidence. And then they begin to trust you, I think, in a deeper way, but they also begin to trust themselves. Now, when I need to have a coaching conversation or I need to step in, I've made emotional and leadership deposits into them that those transactions are not as difficult anymore because they know I'm going to trust them to step forward. They've been given the opportunity to perform. And now we need to come alongside and like, hey, let's course correct it in another way. And it's not as difficult as a thing. But I think a lot of times leaders, they do. We've all been there before where we struggle with that empowering of people, but it's so freeing and borderline, for a lack of a better word, addicting as a leader when you can see that light come on and that ownership and responsibility from giving somebody their trust. We've all been there as at one point in time, we had a leadership trust in us and look what it did for our own esteem, for our development. But there's a different level of ownership and critical thinking that I think kicks in when you know it's riding on your shoulders.
Right.
Okay, well, bounce your ideas off me. Let's talk through it. And then to your point, you decide if there's something you feel like, let's work through that. Now, as a follower, one thing I often have told my leaders is I want to be close enough connected to you so that I can try to understand your pattern and way of thinking so that I can replicate that because you've trusted me to be in this space. So I want to step into that space and understand and operate in your way of thinking because I trust and respect you as a leader. As long as there's good camaraderie, there's good relationship there. And we're not talking about anything morally or ethically wrong. All those disclaimers aside, I want to know how my leader would handle this situation. And then the more I've done that, the more I've asked questions, the more I've internalized that, then I am more effectively able to step into that space and be confident handling, be congruent with my company.
Yeah, 100%, man. I love that because it does that closeness, that proximity to the leader is a huge thing because then you do get to go, okay, hey, I think they'd make this decision here. And they can influence you without you having to go like, hey, you got a minute? We got how many minutes get taken away every day from you got a minute? So let's talk about one of the things that I think is a tension in companies is, okay, how do we learning and development? How do we produce enough resources for them to kind of own their own growth and development? And how much is, okay, hey, we're going to block out this time. You're going to come to this training. And yes, it's kind of for, you're voluntold to go through it. How do you balance those two within a company of like, hey, here's the resources for you to own your own growth and development. And here's the resources and the tools. And then the other thing that I think was more prevalent of like, you're going to this, you're going to learn this thing. And we strongly tell you that you're going to go do that.
Yeah. I think, I've been a part of organizations where training and development or learning and development, any of those things where it felt very punitive. I've been in a variety of organizations and in, onboarding a new associate type roles, whether mentoring or leading or anything like that, where people have kind of disdain from their prior organization, where it was very much like you're underperforming, so you have to go. One thing one of my leaders said years ago, always stuck with me, is that learning is not an event. learning is an experience, and it's something that you never really grow at. My wife and I, we homeschool for many reasons. If you would talk to her, she never intended on that. There are people out there that I knew in college and they're like, I can't wait. I'm going to homeschool my kids. We're going to do it differently, very aspirational in that way. That was never really something on our radar. As much as we're connecting to the times that we are in and looking at the outlet and looking at how the world is and what's going to be better for our children to try to succeed. And that was the decisions we've invested a lot of time, energy, effort, money, all of these things to give them a great education that's very personalized for them. I use that as an analogy to say, like, how do organizations, how do you determine, kind of what you're out? I think learning definitely is an experience that needs to happen. But for me, it definitely starts with connecting to what the organization needs and is trying to achieve. Because nobody wants to put on events just for the sake of, we've done it, let's check a box. We developed our people. Development is a choice for people, because some people, they're an active or passive resistor. So they're choosing to not go along with the development of the culture. So they can opt out in some way. Even if you force them to be there, they can still opt out. Right. So that's important. I think it all starts with connecting to the culture and then connecting to what your goals and your intention and your purpose is. And once you've done those things, that will probably lead you to a place of, what do we then need for training? Because to me, and it goes back to one of the things I opened up saying, is we are the age of information versus the age of action is where we're kind of in that struggle. So how do we make sure they have the information and enough information? And then what's the best vehicle for that to them, versus they need to see it, apply it. I've held, I don't even know off the top of my head, probably 4 or 5 different sales roles throughout my lifetime, maybe more, less, but those are just the ones that are jumping at me right now. And some of those roles, it's here's your binder and go. Another one was a 12-week long program. Another one was, I'm shadowing somebody for a period of time. Some were blends of all of those things. And I think it really starts with connecting to what your organization is trying to do, and then weeding out the unnecessary clunkiness of it, of some of it.
Yeah, I think that's wise for sure. Where do you see, because you mentioned earlier, like the last, I guess, 2-3 years now, shifted a lot of personal growth, learning, virtual more, all of these things. You mentioned the introduction of AI and the steam that it has right now. Where do you see training and development, leadership growth, where do you see that going with all we have going on right now?
My personal interpretation, I'll set any experience or role that I have or that I'm currently in or anything like that aside. I personally deeply believe in the human connection. I think people will always need aspect and that human connection. So being able to personalize training and being able to personalize information, I think is going to be prevalent. It would be foolish to sit here and say, AI is not a disruptor, or that AI will not be disrupting, our industry or that industry or this industry. I think the safe bet is to assume that AI is going to disrupt everything. Because then at least you put yourself in a position to think of it differently, to see, how you can embrace it, how you can utilize it and optimize it to serve your purpose or your company goals within the realm of what's ethical and correct and all of those things. So I think for me, we're going to need to get hyper focused in and continue to be focused in on where it can optimize and how we can benefit from, but not at the sake of personalization. Because, I'm reading a book about persuasion right now, and they talk about some of the various tactics that go into persuasion. And one of them, yes, is social proof. And then it's likability, your ability to actually relate to a person and seem likable. AI can't manufacture that, and it can't manufacture a genuine connection, and it can't manufacture and create a genuine care or emotion yet. I don't know. It can't do that. We'll see where it goes. But I think that's going to be a very important pattern for us to stay connected to and understand. And so then how do I keep it personal and centered on the wants, the needs, and the goals that the person has, and how that intersects with what we're trying to do as a company, and then find the sweet spot of training and developing our people in that way. So there's a lot. I mean, we could spend a full hour just talking about what's out there right now.
Right. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with the personal connection. That's why I was really, I think it was like a very short blip, and who knows, it may come back, but when everything was metaverse,
NFTs, yeah.
NFTs, the whole world, we're just going to wear these massive goggles and the deal and the whatever. And it's like, maybe one day. But that was always my deal of like, you can't disconnect from human connection. We saw what that did 2020, 2021, isolation. Like, I just agree 100%. A virtual world can't produce human connection.
Nailed it. It can't do that.
And so I think you're spot on there, man. Man, where can people find you? Find out your work, what you're doing, how where you're going to be speaking at, how can they connect with you online?
Yeah, I think the best place where I'm probably most active is on Instagram. I have a presence on Facebook, but I'm transparently not super active there. And I think that's the best space is through Instagram, where we're trying to put our energy and effort right now. And then, going through the process of redesigning websites, and that just takes longer than you want. I think for the most up-to-date, most relevant way, that's probably the best way at this point in time.
Perfect, man. Well, we'll link that in there. Man, thanks so much for being on the show today. Dropping value as I knew you would. I got one more question for you. Mm-hmm. At Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast, we want to know, what does it mean to be a champion to you?
I think, when I think about the word, what I know about the word champion is that it comes from a Latin word that means to fight. And I think everybody at some point or place is fighting with something. They're wrestling with something, a mindset, a struggle, inflation, right? Whatever. All of these things, we're fighting something. And I think that really starts with a champion. I think it starts with it actually having a mindset and understanding what could be standing in your way and how to overcome the obstacle that's in the way. So whatever that is, I would say for any person, it's about looking at it, and rather than choosing to be defeated by what's standing in your way, or choosing to, let it determine or control or defeat you, instead choosing to look at it and say, how can I overcome this? And how can I beat this? How can I figure this out? Whether it's a generational thing through your family, they never said you would get out of this area. They never said you would, or nobody in our family has ever. Will always be whatever limitations people put on you, and choosing to fight against that and believing that there is more, that there is something, there's a purpose, a calling, a destiny, any of those things in front of you, and then choosing to fight for that. To me, that's what a champion is somebody who's choosing to rage against that and fight for something, for themselves, for their legacy, for their family, all of the above.
I love it, Randy. And you are one of someone that has taken and gone, hey, I know where this word was founded and created. So kudos to you, man. Learned something new today about champ and champion. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Love it. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yes, sir.
You've been listening to the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Our passion is to talk to successful people and hear all about their journey and what it took to get there. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up the website at unleashthechamp.com. Find us on Instagram at Kyle J. Sullivan, and hit up that Facebook page at Unleash the Champ. Remember, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving.